morning. Good morning. Good morning. Ooh. Good morning. You can like and share this video right now. You can like and share this video right now. Right now. Tag somebody's name in it that needs to know about grace, about God's grace. We're about to get started in 1 second, y'all. The Bible says, "For this is the day that the Lord hath made, we shall rejoice and be glad in it." For this is the day, today is the day that the Lord hath made, we shall rejoice and be glad in it. Lord, I love this song. Today we're talking about grace. This is, let me do me a favor. Today we're talking about grace. Let me read you something. Grace. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 says this, verse 9. "And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore," here we go, "will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest up on me." Hey, cuz, he says, "that I may glorify in my infirmities, that the power of the Lord may rest upon me." But he says, my grace is sufficient. Today we're talking about grace. Have you ever been in a time in your life where you felt like God's grace has ran out, where you messed up so much, where people lied so much, where things weren't coming your way, and you were scratching your head wondering like, God, is your grace still with me? Are you still covering me? Are you still protecting me? Are you still on my side? Are you still going to heal me? Are you still going to bring me out? God says sometimes you have to go through some things and sit in some things in order for you to know that I am the God of those things. Let me say it again. Sometimes you got to go through some things and sit through some things so you can know that I am the God of those things. One more time, God. Sometimes you have to go through some things and sit through some things to know that he is the God over those things. Don't be frustrated. Don't get upset. The Bible says he gave him a thorn in his flesh to buffet him. Buffet means to smooth him. That hurt you going through, that pain you going through, that sickness you going through, that depression you went through, that mental illness you went through, that trial you went through, it wasn't to hurt you, it was to buffet you. You got to go through some things to smooth you out, to make you clean, to make you pure. It's okay to go through. It's okay to have a trial. It's okay to have a tribulation. It's okay to go through some storms. Why? Because the storms didn't come to break you, it came to make you. And had it not been for God's grace and had not been for God's mercy, where would you be? What would you do? How would you act? What would you say? How would you love? How would you grow? How would you give? How would you forgive? But it was by the grace and mercy of God. God give us grace every time we wake up. He give us grace today that we didn't have yesterday. The Bible says brand new mercies shall he give us every day. Mercy and or grace that he gives us every day. We ought to be thankful that we opened our eyes. We ought to be thankful that we can breathe out our nose, that we can talk through our mouth, that we can see through our eyes, that we can hear through our ears. It is by the grace and by his mercy. That accident should have took you out. That slap across the head should have made you go crazy. That push in the back should have made you fall over. But God says, because I have given them my grace, and my grace is sufficient. You don't need more grace. You don't need a lot of grace. You don't need extra grace. Only thing you need is grace. 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 God's redemption at Christ's expense. God's redemption at Christ's expense. The reason why you got what you got, the reason why you have what you have, the reason why you can pray the way you pray, preach the way you preach, sing the way you sing, love the way you love, give the way you give, be thankful the way you're thankful, is because God had to die, but Christ redeemed us. God had said, you know what? They messing up, they going through, they doing things wrong. I got to send me down there and get things right. You ought to thank God every day for Christ. You ought to thank God every day that he sent his son. You ought to thank God every day that he walked on water, that he took nails in his hands and spikes in his feet and crown of thorns on his head. Why? Because he has given us grace. I am in love with God because every day I wake up is another grace moment. Every day I wake up is another grace moment. Grace is looking you in your face saying you can make it. You will be the head and not the tail. You are above and not beneath. You are in and not out. You are up and not down. You are not without. You have everything that you need. Why? Because I have given you grace. I gave you grace when you lied. I gave you grace when you didn't do right. I gave you grace when you didn't say thank you. I gave you grace when you didn't give me my praise, when you didn't give me my worship, when you didn't go to church, when you didn't tithe, when you didn't give, when you didn't serve, when you didn't sow. I gave you grace. Why? Because I am a sovereign God and I thank God for his grace. Somebody write that in the box. Thank God for grace. Thank God for grace. Thank God for grace. He graced you when you go to work. He graced you when you get your paycheck. He graced you when you pay your bills. He graced you when you got that sickness. Let me tell you something. You ain't got cancer. Cancer ain't got you. You got grace. It was by his grace and by his mercy that you healed, that you're forgiven, that you're set free, that you're above, that you have what you have, that you do what you do. God says as of today, grace is in your face. There we go. Grace is in your face. Grace is in your face. When you wake up, grace. When you go to bed, grace. When you go through surgery, grace. When you go through the doctor, grace. When you go to the store, grace. When you pay your bills, grace. When you talk to your friends, grace. When you start your car, grace. When you're driving on the highway, grace. Everything around you is grace in your face. Grace is in your face. And let me tell you something. I'm in a good grace place. There you go. I'm in a good grace place right now. I ain't got no worries. I ain't tripping. I ain't upset. I ain't mad. I ain't going through. I ain't scratching my head. Why? Because I'm in my grace place. And my grace place says that I am the lender and not the borrower. My grace place says that I am above and not beneath. My grace place says that I am God's servant. I am a man of God. I am a woman of God. Let me tell you who you are. You ain't just no old average Joe. You ain't just no old bootleg. You are God's man. You are God's woman. You are God's child. You are a friend of God. Why? Because you in your grace place. You in your grace place. You in your grace place, not your great place, but your grace place. And God says you got what you got because of grace. You live where you live because of grace. You drive what you drive because of grace. You worship where you worship because of grace. Thank God for grace. Grace on my pastor, grace on my mama, grace on my daddy, grace on my children, grace on myself, grace on my friends, grace on my job, grace in my home, grace in my life, grace when I read your word, grace when I study your word, grace when I pray your word. I am in my grace place. Why? Because I know how I feel not to have grace. I know how I feel to have the cover taken off of me. I know how I feel to be exposed. But since God has covered me, since God has protected me, since God has given me strength, since God has reset the button on me, I'm in my grace place. Don't you let nobody mess up your grace place. Don't you let nobody mess up your happy place. Don't you let nobody mess up what God has done for you. You work too hard. You've been through too much. You cried too many tears. You had too many lonely nights to have somebody mess up your grace place. And let me tell you something, by the grace of God, you're going to do it. Then you can sit back and say, by the grace of the Lord, I come a long way. By the grace of the Lord, I come a long way. It was grace that brought me, and grace that taught me. By the grace of the Lord, I come a long way. Yes, I have. You've come a long way. We've come a long way. Our lives have come a long way, not because we've been so kind, not because we've been so perfect, not because we've been so wonderful. It was because God has given us a grace place. And let me tell you something. Don't you be upset. Don't you get mad. Don't you be frustrated. You are in your grace place. You are in your grace place. Excuse my voice, it's all good. But you are in your grace place. I love you all. I care for you all. I thank you all. I love you all. I care for you all. And I thank you all. And always remember that where you are is not who you are. Taking my loves. I see y'all Wednesday.